Grigory Armenovich, the rest of Kazakhstan and our film crew have been closely monitoring the Taiga relocation project. There was even a high-level meeting of the heads of states shown on TV.
Сейчас мы развиваем международный проект по восстановлению популяции.
Indeed, we have been implementing an international project to restore the population of tigers previously called the Turan tigers.
В данном очень интересном проекте
Russian experts have been engaged in the project too.
под популяцию этих тигров.
I consider it quite an interesting and promising initiative.
Думаю, что это очень интересный проект с перспективой на реализацию.
We are all concerned about the fate of the Turan tiger. We met last year and saw the release of 5 deer into the wild nature. They put remote sensing collars on them for monitoring purposes. What has happened to the reserve and those deer over the past year?
К тем 5 оленям, про которых вы упомянули.
In addition to the 5 deer you've mentioned, we've brought 78 more and have also released them into the wild. As of today, in the course of the past 2 years, altogether we have released about 100 deer, including the ones that you have mentioned. Several fawns were born during that time. We are also planning to bring another 120 deer. In addition, we have been actively feeding our wild boars and roe deer. We have been providing them with some extra feed every winter, and this allows the baby deer to survive. Thus, the overall number of ungulates has been growing. Harsh winters are quite often in the southern Balkhash area. Regular extra feeding saves young boars from starvation and helps Tugay deer adapt to their new habitat. The initial years are the most difficult to forging a stable deer population. The development of stable social groups and relationships between the deer and the predators requires time and special control.
В летнее время мы совместно с...
In summer, jointly with the Institute of Zoology of Kazakhstan, we have been executing target efforts to ensure water supply to our goited gazelles. Summer is the hardest time for them when they are not getting water which they need. With us installing the watering sites in the middle of the Balkhash-Kapshagay ecological corridor and on the reserve's edge in the Sary-Yasik-Atarau desert, they have been feeling themselves much better. Their population has been increasing. According to literature, in the second half of the 20th century, a stable goited gazelle group of about 3,000 animals used to inhabit the Taukum and Sary-Yasik-Atarau sands. In the early 21st century, their number had sharply dropped. Yet now, thanks to protection and biotechnical measures, the population of these animals has slowly started to recover. We hope that this year, jointly with the UNDP, we will launch the relocation of kulans from the Altyn-Emel to the Ile Balkhash Reserve thanks to the financing under a related project. We have already built the open-air cage and have been waiting for the UN Development Program to sponsor the actual transportation mission. Once, the countless Kulan bevies had been roaming the entire territory of the Great Steppe, but at the beginning of the 20th century they had completely disappeared in Kazakhstan. In the 1950s, about 20 Kulans were brought to the Barsak-Elmes Reserve on the Aral Sea from the Batkez Reserve in Turkmenistan. In the course of 20 years, their number on the island had grown up to 200 animals. In 1982, 28 kulans from the Barsak Almes were relocated to the right bank of the Ile River to the Kapshagai Hunting and Conservation Farm, where later on in 1996 the Altinamel National Park was established. Currently, the number of kulans in the national park exceeds 3,500, and the new task for scientists is to ensure that the animals distribute over their former vast habitat.
Это то, что касается территории и увеличения числа копытных.
This is regarding the habitat and the increasing number of ungulates, as well as the overall changes in the southern Balkhash area. The reserve is operating as it should. Our rangers are patrolling the reserve's premises. Our science unit has signed several agreements with the Institute of Zoology and the Institute of Geography and Water Safety of Kazakhstan. The necessary research efforts are underway in order to ensure that by 2024-2025 everything is ready to welcome the striped cat.
Приезду большой полосатой кошки.
All year round, the reserve's protection and science units are collecting information about animals, their numbers, spatial distribution, seasonal migrations, and relationships with predators. For this purpose, visual observations and photo traps, remote sensing collars and drones are used. The data obtained from one source is supplemented with and verified based on the information gathered by other means. In addition, twice a year in the fall and in late winter, special missions comprising the authorized representatives of the National Ministry of Ecology and Research agencies hold scheduled state inventories. As for any specially protected area, it is very important for the state nature reserve to be aware of the overall state and number of wild species of animals on its premises. The first thing to do is to map out the accounting routes and form special groups of zoologists and park rangers in the park's office. The reserve's area exceeds 400,000 hectares. The Kapshagai-Ile-Balkhash Eco Corridor, covering 800,000 hectares, is adjacent to it. To inventory such a huge territory, special equipment is necessary, not to mention some highly experienced field mission specialists.
Проводятся осенние.
We conduct fall accountings of wild animals and birds like the Bukhara deer, roe deer, wild boars, foxes, wolves, pheasants and grey partridges. The missions are carried out jointly by the representatives of the Institute of Zoology and the Regional Territorial Forestry and Animal World Inspection. The scheduled fall inventory is usually done in October. It is difficult to detect animals in the plains covered with reeds, tugai and saxaul woods. Accounting is carried out by footprints. Encountering a footprint, each monitoring specialist determines its type and, if possible, the animal's sex and age, and then logs its coordinates in a special accounting card and smartphone-based application. In the evening, the data collected is downloaded to a computer and analyzed, although the final tabletop processing will be carried out later in the city. The inventories allow assessing the state of not only the animal world but also the plant communities. Previously, mass saxaul harvesting was carried out here, and now the reserve and local forestries are gradually restoring the saxaul and coastal tugai forests. This is what carpet saxaul logging leaves behind: a dead field. Saxaul takes long to grow. The seedlings planted this year will turn into 3-4 meter trees only in several decades. Winter, spring, follow-up accountings are executed over the stable snow cover. It is much easier to detect animal footprints, but extreme temperature, vast space and snowdrifts create additional difficulties, the only way to cope with which is with the help of special equipment and experienced expedition participants. Although it's minus 30 degrees Celsius outside, it's quite cozy in the hardtop canopy all-terrain Kamaz truck. The transportation and release of tugai deer has been going on for 3 years. The animals are immobilized with flying syringes charged with an antidote and sedative to reduce stress. The release from open-air cages usually takes place at night. The adopted international methodology for animal relocation to new habitats provides for mandatory boarding in a special open-air cage. As a rule, such quarantine lasts up to 6 months. They install remote sensing collars on some animals to be able to track their movement. Your obedient servant, the head of Almaty Regional Territorial Inspection, jointly with the representatives of the Institute of Zoology, the World Wildlife Fund, and Deputy Director of the Ila-Balkhash Reserve, released the deer into the nature. Today we have the largest release ever, 61 animals. We have already conducted 2 releases previously. The moment of release is not only solemn, but likewise exciting. How will animals behave in the new habitat? You are currently observing the soft release of the Bukhara deer. We have already released them twice into their natural habitat. Soft release is a scientific term. To avoid traumatizing animals, the staff quietly open the open-air cage gates, and the animals, as a rule at night, start gradually going outside the fence. The deer are in good condition. In the southern Balkhash area, vegetation has gone perfectly. The only slight problem is the water supply, although Lake Balkhash is not that far. I do believe the deer will be able to create a good local wild population. Tonight, the deer will be surprised to discover a huge world waiting for them outside the fence, full of excellent pastures but also threats. From this day on, these magnificent animals will have to counteract predators on their own.
Ну вот 2 секции мы сняли.
We have removed 2 sections. The most interesting will happen at night, when the deer will walk along the fence and find out there is no net. Tomorrow morning we will see how many deer left the cage and how many have still remained inside. The most important thing is that today, in the Ile-Balkhash Reserve, we already have a full-fledged Bukhara deer population, including 7 to 8-year-old males, females, and even small deer born this year.
Которые родились в этом году.
Opposite to the cage exit, they put out hay, but the deer are still not rushing to leave the usual environment. At night, the boldest take a few timid steps towards the fodder. Gradually, the animals will get used to it and begin to carefully and then more confidently examining the new world around them. Little by little, the radius of their walkouts will expand, and a month later, the remote sensors will already register the hungals tens of kilometers away from the cage. The animals will divide into groups, forming the population's social structure. One deer group was already noticed at a significant distance from the release site, amidst the islands of the Ile Delta. The reserve includes both desert and wetland areas, the coast of Lake Balkhash and part of the Ile River Delta. In addition, the reserve staff are also protecting 2 large reserves in the Ile Delta, the Balkhash and Karoy, totaling about 1 million hectares. Whereas any economic activity is prohibited in the reserve's core zone, hundreds of fishing and tourist sites and farms are located across the reserves. In recent years, the total number of tourists and farmers in the Ile Delta has increased many-fold. That allowed increasing the incomes of the local communities, but also created an additional burden on the ecosystems, including wildfire risks.
В этом году очень много.
This year we had a lot of fires, and all of them were clearly anthropogenically driven. For example, when fishermen go ashore from their boats and leave unattended bonfires or, say, matches. It can be anything. In some cases, they set up a camp and decide to burn out their surroundings for whatever purposes. This year we have lost huge reed areas due to fires. To comfortably live all through the winter, a boar needs a lot of reed thickets. This is where the boars actually live and organize their so-called daytime beds or jataks. This is where they collect their feed as well. In case the reed burns, like it has happened this spring, it doesn't have enough time to regrow sufficiently so that wild boars have enough space for wintering. This is what the experts of the World Wildlife Fund and the reserve's zoologists are most concerned about now. It's clear that this winter it will be very hard for the boars living here to find good marshy thickets to survive the winter. We will definitely provide them with some extra feed, we'll try helping them, but vast and thick reed thickets are most important. Thus we need to do everything to avoid such wildfires.
И таких пожаров быть не должно.
The reserve's core zone, where any economic activity is banned, is surrounded by the so-called cooperation zone, where local farmers are involved in nature conservation efforts and in turn receive some benefits from collaborating with a specially protected area.
проблемы данного региона – это нехватка воды.
Water scarcity is the main issue in the area. The Ila River water level has been dropping year by year. This year we've launched a large-scale drip irrigation project, planted apple trees and some cucurbits. Drip irrigation is already yielding fruit.
Дали свои плоды.
The local farmers have started installing drip irrigation systems due to the falling Ila River discharge. In addition, we have planted about 1,500 fruit tree seedlings as well as cucurbit and garden crops in the local villages. On my personal behalf and on behalf of my fellow villagers, allow me to express gratitude to the organizations that have helped us in achieving all this. We have planted 2 tons of potatoes and the harvest turned out 10 tons. We took the water from the Ketpeng Kaldi channel. People are happy. Everyone got decent yields. Dozens of residents from the villages of Karaoy and Koktal took up the introduction of drip irrigation. Generally speaking, we need to expand drip irrigation deployment to cover all the irrigated land, including our watermelon and melon plantations. It works perfectly and allows saving tons of water. We definitely need to expand the coverage. In the future, we do plan to increase the area under drip irrigation. For instance, the land under cucumbers, melons and watermelons. This method is extremely effective. Our this year's yield is the best evidence that it does work.
Biz mal şaruашылығымен айналысамыз.
We are engaged in animal husbandry. Since last year, we have also started doing gardening and cucurbit growing. The Ila River no longer has enough water. Thus, we decided to install a drip irrigation system, and this year we got some good harvest. Potatoes, tomatoes, watermelons and melons. We are very pleased with the results. We have also planted apple seedlings and they have adapted quite well too. This year we started using drip irrigation for growing our fruit trees. In addition, it is suitable for growing melons and vegetable gardens. It does save a lot of water. We intend to continue using this watering technology in the future. A few years ago, a group of volunteers had planted several hundred trees around the school of the Karaoy village. Most of them have dried up, but the drip irrigation system allowed solving the problem. Look, the trees that we had planted earlier had never grown this big. And now, thanks to the drip irrigation system, they are vegetating much better. Desert poplar or turanga was included in the red list not by accident. This unique tree has a powerful root system and is able to extract water from the depth of more than 15 meters. This is how it survives in desert conditions, yet it is hard to breed turanga artificially. They grow turanga seedlings in special pots until they reach a certain size, and then transfer them to open ground.
Сегодняшняя экспедиция посвящена изучению Пространственного распределения.
Our today's expedition aims to monitor the spatial distribution of wolves in the Ile-Balkhash Reserve. To thoroughly investigate this matter, the World Wildlife Fund has invited one of the leading wolf specialists from Russia, Doctor of Biological Sciences, Professor, and member of the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, Mr. Anatoly Nikolaevich Kudaktin. Anatoly Nikolaevich, we have been traveling around the reserve for 3 days. You have examined the tracks and multiple other traces of wolf activity. On one of the photo trap images, we have even seen a wolf walking with a piece of meat in its mouth. What are your impressions of the condition of wolf packs inhabiting the reserve?
Состояние волчьих семей здесь в резервате.
Территория большая, очень разнообразная.
The territory is quite large and diverse.
И, в общем-то, все
Extremely diverse, I should say. The habitats where different animals live are also very different.
пустыня, есть приморская.
Reeds, desert, coastal sections. There are also large dry playa sections.
Скажу сразу, что условия для жизни животных
There's a bit of everything here. The conditions for the life of animals are quite extreme, I must say. Our expedition allowed revealing some patterns in terms of distribution of both wolves and their prey. Where there are reed thickets and there's food for wild boars, gerbils or say hares, there will definitely be wolves.
Присутствует заяц, талай, там есть волк. Но самое-то оказалось интересное то, что волки
The most interesting insight is that local wolves are clearly tied to the groups of wild boars and small mammals. The express nutrition analysis, based on feces, points to the fact that wild boars, hares and gerbils constitute the main 3 components of wolves' diet locally. Due to the different age of the feces examined, we can assume that in winter wolves prefer wild boars, and in summer they eat a lot of small animals like hares and gerbils.
животных типа зайца и песчанки.
The hare population has been always demonstrating significant fluctuations. 2 years ago there was a lot of them, yet this year their number got much smaller.
В этом году зайца меньше.
This year, judging by the tracks and photo trap images, there is indeed fewer hares. The wolf packs are dominated by the last year's wolflings. This year's generation is quite small. This natural auto-regulation is generally manifested in all wolf populations.
Проявляется во всех популяциях волка.
In early winter, when the wolf mating season begins, the settled and newly arrived wolf packs will start competing for territory and feed resources.
Это очень интересное будет наблюдение, и я думаю, что на следующий год
This will be a very interesting observation, and I do believe that next year the number of wolves will not grow, for the only reason their main summertime food, hares, are too few, and wild boars will simply be not enough to feed the wolflings. A new wolf group consisting of 1 or 2 families will start forming exactly where they have been releasing the deer. And these wolves will be specializing on deer, although now wild boars represent their dominating prey. They will master a new type of hunting. We have 2 options here, either taking measures to protect the deer or allowing the populations themselves to cross-self-adjust their relationships and populations.
вмешательство по спасению оленей.
It is noteworthy that academician Kudaktin drew attention to the presence of wolf-dog hybrids. Many tenants operating inside the reserve keep large dog kennels. Some of them become wild, whereas wild wolves are full-fledged ecosystem participants. Stray dogs and wolf-dog hybrids are the result of anthropogenic exposure.
Надо немножко посмотреть подольше и
We need to monitor the situation for a little longer and, based on the results, potentially offer the deer to resettle not only where they do it naturally, but to other places as well. For this, we need to prepare such new places for their arrival, and it will take considerable time, at least 5 to 7 years for the new deer generation born here to spread over the new territory and create their own signal biological habitat.
Свое сигнально-биологическое поле.
What did the wolf do? It ate a ball. Anatoly Nikolaevich has proposed an interesting way to study the wolf's social behavior. What will happen if you cover a marker point left by one wolf pack with the feces of another pack? This here is a border mark. That pack will definitely come to leave a mark. This is how they notify each other. And this photo trap here will get us some visual evidence. If they came from over there, they will not violate someone else's territory and will return home. This is how they mark their borders. We have installed a photo trap here to photograph how wolves will react to the mark that we have left here. What will the photo trap capture? Will the two packs, acknowledging the border division, peacefully disperse across their plots or wage a war between themselves for territory? We are at the Karamergen Ranger Station, where the group led by academician Kudakin meets with a task force responsible for designing an effective anti-wildfire plan. Lunch is a good time to discuss some burning issues. If you take 90 degrees, then the fire most likely will distribute across this opening here in patches. This is why the northernmost of them can be seen along this line.
Для того, чтобы оказать помощь Государственному природному резервату или Балхаш.
To assist the Ilia-Balkhash State Nature Reserve, the World Wildlife Fund has invited a fire control expert, Anton Benislavsky. Anton has worked in Germany, Indonesia, Cyprus, the Far East, and most importantly in Astrakhan, where wildfires are exactly the same, reed-based, and the area is very similar too. His expertise is extremely valuable for us, and we do hope to get some recommendations from him in the nearest future that will help us in our fire protection efforts.
Государственному природному резервату или Балхаш.
Территория государственного природного резервата или Балхаш очень, скажем так, интересная с пожарной точки зрения.
The territory of the Ilia-Balkhash State Nature Reserve is very interesting in terms of wildfires. Such a combination of conditions is hard to find. In Russia, there are just a few protected areas with a similar setting. Grigory has mentioned my experience of working in Astrakhan relevant here. As any protected area, the reserve has a fire security system designed to extinguish wildfires. Yet some of the local special conditions will require additional target measures. What is so special about the Astrakhan wildfires? There they have a network of observation towers as well as special portable equipment such as blowers. They are most effective in fighting reed fires. Instead of heavy fire engines, they use light vehicles. Even the special forest fire engines, generally lighter than the conventional urban fire engines, are too heavy for these soils and are not suitable for local conditions. A reed wildfire is swift. It generates a lot of heat, moves at high speed, and covers large areas very quickly.
Ты упомянул воздуходув.
Anton, you've mentioned the blowers. Can you explain how they operate and how to use them to extinguish 4 or 5 meters tall flames? That's a lot, right? In essence, it's a portable air compressor generating a very fast air jet. The jet allows cooling down the fuel, in its turn leading to reduced intensity of combustion. But the main principle is the same as when we were blowing the birthday candles in childhood. A strong air stream disrupts burning particles and they squelch due to burning very quickly. This allows extinguishing grass or reed fires with very high efficiency. It is also important to set up an early fire detection system comprising highly mobile and effective firefighting groups. We have tested this model in Astrakhan. There we worked in small mobile groups traveling on 4-wheel drive vehicles and had a network of observation points allowing us to register in what direction the fire was distributing on the territory adjacent to the reserve. This way we managed to quickly intercept them before they entered the reserve's premises. There are huge reed fields which you can drive up to. There are fields that are bordering on water channels or lakes, and you can get close to them with a boat. What would you recommend if a fire breaks out over a conditional swamp overgrown with 5-meter tall reed, which is impossible to swim or to drive up to? Are there ways to combat such wildfires? There are methods for fighting every type of fire. One of the methods is to find some support strips, that is, some barriers that will prevent the fire from spreading, and from them to wage the so-called backfire, thus destroying the fuel on the fire's pathway. Some criticize this extinguishing method because we ourselves burn part of the territory. Yet the principle here is simple: giving up a pawn to save the queen. You've mentioned the so-called support strip. Am I getting it right that among the recommendations you will also advise establishing some mineral strips? How important are they? Not only mineral, but also fire-breaking strips. It is a comprehensive phenomenon. They consist of both mineral strips, where all the potential fire fuel got removed down to the ground, and the so-called fire gaps. That is, an area that will not allow the fire overcoming it under the most likely conditions. Unfortunately, it's not possible to build a strip consisting of pure reinforced concrete. The cost is too high, plus some additional factors. Under certain conditions, any road can serve a support strip for starting a backfire or a fire barrier. My recommendations will definitely include this. The fact is that if there is a thoroughly thought-out network of fire gaps, prepared axing strips and defense lines, it will not allow a wildfire to grow to a scale when it is already impossible to control it. Our yet another expedition is over, and it is time for us to return to the city and take stock.
Результаты обследования показывают, что у нас на территории около 6 территорий.
The survey outcomes show that we have about 6 territorial families and about 60 wolves in total. Such an increase in the number of wolves is certainly associated with the increase in the number of ungulates. All our efforts to boost the number of wild boars and import deer lead to the fact that the predators hunting on them, of course, follow their prey. The expedition was dedicated to assessing the natural damage to wild ungulates from wolves. We assume that when tigers arrive, the wolves will get scared and run away. In fact, in all places where tigers live, there are no wolves because they are tigers' prey.
Волка нет просто потому, что волк является добычей для тигра.
We hope it was not our last expedition jointly with the scientists to the southern Balkhash area. In the near future, they plan to relocate Kulans, and we do very much hope to observe this process and show it to you, our dear viewers. Follow us in the social media as well as on the Kazakh TV's YouTube channel. Till next time.